Police and fire protection doesn't come cheap. But with the cost rising sharply, many Orange County contract cities are questioning if they're getting their money's worth. Some officials are even hinting that cities might drop the sheriff and county fire authority and form their own safety agencies. What's driving this? What could it mean for residents and taxpayers? And some big cities with their own police departments have problems too. Santana, Anaheim, Huntington Beach, all embroiled in controversy with a common denominator: a police chief at odds with his rank and file's union. What gives? Well, here to discuss all this, Norberto Santana, a voice of OC, and Will Swaim of the California Policy Center, right now on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by...
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Chapman University is a proud sponsor of Inside OC and community programming.
Understand.
Yeah.
That's what you get in democracy, man.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Rick Reiff, and I'm talking with the engaging Norberto Santana and Will Swaim. Gentlemen, great to have you back on. Lots to talk about in law enforcement, and much of it boils down to dollars and cents, or perhaps dollars and nonsense, but we'll be discussing that. So let's start with the situation between the Sheriff's Department and the 13 contract cities in Orange County that receive their police protection from the Sheriff's Department. And by the way, those cities: Mission Viejo, Aliso Viejo, Dana Point, Laguna Hills, Laguna Niguel, Laguna Woods, Lake Forest, Rancho Santa Margarita, San Clemente, San Juan Capistrano, Stanton, Villa Park, and Yorba Linda. You guys knew that, but I had to, read those 13 out. All right, so anyway, these cities are spending $300,000 to do a story to examine the costs and costs of this service and ways to come up with savings because these costs keep rising. While it's not part of this proposal, there are a couple of officials who are saying, maybe this will lead to the creation of our own police force. So what's going on here, Norberto?
I mean, you've got, again, we were talking about a minute ago, you've got here these contract cities, many of which are the safest cities in America, year after year after year. These city council members are starting to ask questions, which is, more than 60% of their budget is going towards public safety in the safest places in America. At the same time, their contracts with the Sheriff's Department have gone up by something like 25% in the last few years. Most of these cities are looking at almost close to double-digit increases in the last few years. Much of it driven by large pension obligations and increased wages, which the Board of Supervisors keeps giving to the deputy sheriffs in a way to help out their campaign possibilities. But the people that actually have to pay that bill, the South County contract cities, are beginning to ask some questions and say, guys, you're pricing yourself, in a sense, out of the market to the point where maybe we create our own force. The big driver here is that these contract cities are not responsible for the unfunded pension liabilities that their partners over at the Board of Supervisors have created. So in many ways, when these people start to do these studies, they're going to find out that you can start your own agency at a much cheaper price because you're not paying the same for one of these deputies. Now the sheriff, all these people, they say, we welcome the study. When you do this study, you're going to find out how much money we're actually saving you. We'll see.
Yeah. So, Will, what's your take?
Well, I love Norberto touched on what I think is the key point for people to remember. When we talk about these kinds of issues, I'm afraid a lot of people kind of check out because it really does sound like a math problem in 7th grade or something. What we have to remember is a really simple political reality, and that is that the public employee unions, cops, firefighters, for example, we'll be talking about the firefighters in a moment, but in this case, sheriffs, law enforcement, these are guys who have a union. This union is very powerful. It collects dues from its members, and then it spends those dues in pursuit of political candidates who will promise to then endorse pay increases for those very same police unions or firefighters unions. So you have this system of official, legalized, I would call it corruption. that allows unions to handpick the people they'll be negotiating contracts with as soon as the election is over. And this allows them to constantly go forward before these people they've helped get elected and get pay increases, get pension increases. And we're now in a situation where most of our law enforcement can retire at 50 with about 90% of their highest year of income. At 50 years of age, the three of us here, I can't speak for this young man, but some of us would be long retired and on to our second and third careers. So and statistics also show, I just want to get to one last math number, and that is that most of these guys live to be about 84, actuarially speaking. That's a great word, actuarially. We can predict these people will live to about 84. That means that we'll be paying for them in retirement 90% of their income, plus cost of living increases, and health care benefits, that's also figured in here, for 34 years, perhaps? That's a long time. So all these cities in South County are collapsing under that.
So once again, it comes down to that issue of the pension costs. And so what you're saying, Norberto, is you think, because I'm thinking, well, it doesn't really matter whether you're the contract cities or you're a city that has its own police force or you're the sheriff's department, you all have these costs. You're saying maybe these contract cities can say, we don't really have to deal with these costs anymore. We'll set up our own department, but now we'll be hiring police then who will be under radically different terms than any other public police force that I know of, at least until now, has been, which is that maybe they have a 401k retirement plan, and these cities will start from scratch. Boy, well, that will be a political firestorm.
That's exactly what will happen, because that's where all the savings are. The fact is that in many ways, sheriff union, the public safety unions, and the politicians, as you said, that are approving these contracts, largely without even looking at them. You ask most of these city council members, hey, in Mission Viejo, what's the difference between having 35 deputies and 39 deputies? Did you study that? Did you look at it? What are you getting? I don't think there's a council member in Orange County that could really talk to you about how that budget is being spent. So you're right. The minute that they take pensions off the table with public safety, your costs will radically go down. Not only that, you may be looking in South County when they start doing these studies, what happens when you have a fire authority that most of its calls are EMS? You know,
that's emergency medical, yeah.
Correct. Yeah. In Las Vegas, where you have these large-scale events, what you're really finding the need for is a blended public safety worker, somebody that can treat a victim on the ground, can, you know, deal with arresting somebody. That may be where we're going in the future.
Well, you know, maybe that's something good will come from these studies.
Well, I think that, you know, one of the things, for example, I've been an advocate, at least in firefighting, if not in policing, and I've been an advocate in firefighting of using the military model. It seems to me like absolutely incredible that we don't consider running a fire authority the way that we run the Army, for example, where you bring people in for 2 or 4 years, and that's the life expectancy, that is career expectancy. Most people are out after 2 or 4 years. They do their service and they go away. They get a GI benefit, they get some health care benefit, but the pension obligation is gone at that point. There is no real pension. It's very modest at that point. And there's no reason that firefighters couldn't be treated in roughly the same way. Trained up. We train guys to carry weapons, to deliver emergency medical in the military, and they're 19 years old, and they hit the field, and we give them lethal weaponry. We can certainly hand them a hose, train them in emergency medical, and bring them in for 4 years or 6 years. The best ones we bring up as officers to train those who come in behind them, and the others go to college for 4 years, and then we're done. So there are models. There are alternative models here.
I like this kind of outside-the-box thinking we're doing here.
I hear a caveat.
No, not really. I think that when you've got this with the fire, I think it adds on to what you were saying. Well, there aren't that many fires anymore.
No.
House fires. Now, as we speak, we have wildfires going on as we speak, and you need that force to go in and to deal with that. But now it's all EMT.
Yes.
It's all EMT. And so
we find 70 and 80% of all calls now, even more in some places.
Right.
Up to 90% I've heard in Costa Mesa.
So in some ways, we really need an emergency medical service.
Yes.
More than
fire.
More than fire, because we've been very successful at reducing the number of non-wildfires.
True, and I mean, a lot of your challenges in these areas, like right now the wildfires that are going on, half your challenge is evacuating people. And that's, again, it's a public safety challenge, but it can be tackled in a lot of different ways. Look, the jails right now, you're telling me that a civilian can't operate a jail cell that opens up and closes? I mean, that's largely what you have. You largely now have deputy sheriffs that the idea was they would go into a jail for a year or two, get some training, and then go out on patrol. Now they spend up to 8 years in the jail where overtime is ready, easy, plannable. And so you now, again, as a taxpayer, you're paying a ton of money for a jailer. You're paying a ton of money for someone on patrol. And you're not really getting the specialization that you probably should be. If you spend 8 years in a jail and then you go out to patrol.
I wanted to know what kind of training are you getting in that jail if then you go out on patrol in a place like Irvine? I'm just wondering. Yeah.
These are the questions, and the big question is the Board of Supervisors, who are really the regional leaders here, are they doing the outside the box thinking? Are they asking themselves, instead of continuing to go down the same road with jails that don't seem to work, which the union is suing the sheriff saying that the jails are a complete and total mess, and that's like almost your main cost driver there. Unincorporated areas, places like San Bernardino and Riverside have much larger unincorporated areas to police than we do. That area has really shrunk.
So, you know, in a way though, expensive or not, we need a jail. I think the Sheriff's Department would argue they have SWAT teams and other special things that maybe the contract cities don't need every day, but when you need it, you want it, and that's part of the cost.
That's true. The question is, how much is that part of the cost? And the big question again goes back to the Board of Supervisors. How much have you able to tell me this is part of a regional responsibility? Probation officers, the general thing, a SWAT team. Now again, I can't remember the last time a SWAT team, maybe when it was an MMA fighter that was barricaded and they had to use some sort of SWAT approach in the South. But that's what the South County cities are going to ask a lot. How often are we using hazmat? How often are we using SWAT teams? All these different helicopters.
But you can already imagine the union campaign on behalf of keeping things as a status quo. It's that if you don't elect our candidate, the police union, the sheriff's deputies union will say, your grandmother's going to be raped in a house aflame. It will be a wreck. We are the thin line between civilization and total breakdown.
But again, no one's arguing that we're not going to have officers. The question again goes,
someone will be making that argument.
How much do they get
but
compensated?
that will be the political argument.
The political argument will be very powerful.
So let's, and so this makes, Norberto, you brought up the idea of the topic of the fire authority, and that's what we want to talk about next, and that is that in January, the Irvine City Council directed its staff to explore leaving the Orange County Fire Authority in 2020 and would return with a plan on how that could be accomplished. Interestingly, since that came out in January, there's been nothing about it. I contacted Irvine to see if there was an update, and they're not saying anything. Very sensitive subject, but this really gets, you talk about money, this really gets to be a touchy subject. Irvine says it, through its property taxes, has been paying far too much over the years. The fire authority actually cut a deal with Irvine to pay them something like it was a lot of money, $134 million to get Irvine to stay, and the courts threw it out. The court said, illegal. You can't do that. And so now Irvine's back to the drawing board. Do you think anything's going to come of this?
Absolutely. Again, the numbers will continue to drive these conversations. These are conversations that politicians have tried to avoid for years, but as they avoid it more and more, the numbers continue to grow, and that's what happens in life.
And here's what's going to make this an absolutely fascinating spectacle, like get the popcorn and watch as political observers. What's going to happen is that other services will be cut out, right? We all talk about the crowd out of services here, and what that means for those following along at home is that as your cost of police, as your cost of firefighting goes up, other things drop out, right? You can't afford to maybe re-asphalt the streets as much if you like, trim the trees or keep the parks open, run the library. Yeah. So all these other ancillary services get to go by the wayside. Now, if you're a hardcore libertarian, you might just say that those are all fine. Let people cut their own trees or let trees cut themselves. I'm not sure. But the fact is, when services start to decline and neighborhoods start to look like they're declining, people will become engaged. That's the concrete payoff, no pun intended. And we saw this in Costa Mesa, where the public employee unions kept saying, you know, gosh, we could think of millions of ways to save money. It was, don't asphalt streets, don't refurbish the city hall that is falling in on our own members, our own employees. Don't keep the ball fields open. Don't fertilize them as much. Don't water them at all. I mean, it became really like everything else gets to be sacrificed
Yeah.
so that we can continue to get amazing pension program.
And yet, what did they do in Costa Mesa that fixed their budget right away? They got rid of the helicopter program.
That helped, yeah. That's a service.
It righted the budget
Yeah.
right away. And so you see again that they are spending in these areas like reckless drunken sailors, man. They're not asking for bills. They're not asking for any kind of proof of what are we getting, could it be done better? And again, the numbers are catching up with them.
But now they're no longer, they're a city without a helicopter. I think there's a Hollywood film in that. That's very sad.
We have a lot of helicopters flying around, and I don't know if we'll be able to get into that, but that's another interesting turf battle between the sheriff's department and the fire authority as far as who should fly helicopters. But I'm not sure we're going to have time on this show, but who knows? Anyway, but back to the fire authority, all the things we've been talking about with the pension costs, the fire authority is on steroids when it comes to that. And you know, it's one thing if the sheriff loses the contract cities, a big blow, but the sheriff goes on. Sheriff's got a lot of things to do and a lot of things to take care of. The fire authority, they lose Irvine, and they've lost half their, I mean, they've lost the big kahuna, and it's a big question, A, can they even survive? And with the fire authority, and Terry Sforza, our Orange County Register colleague a year or so ago, did an excellent analysis pointing out what the real problem is with the fire authority. All these other cities that have the pension problems, the fire safety, which is so expensive, as Will lined up how you retire at 50 and you get 90%. Those safety pensions are only like 15% of a normal agency's budget. Fire authority, it's like
all
80,
you have,
90% are these very high priced pensions. Irvine leaves and the fire authority's stuck holding a bag that I don't see how they can do
Well,
it.
they're going to have an argument, and you probably know this better than I do, but the argument is going to be if you leave, the contract with the authority seems to be written so that you leave, and it's the fire authority that gets to figure out how to handle the pension problem, right? But the fire authority is likely to come back and argue, no, you leave, you carry the pension problem with you. You don't get to check out of this hotel.
That's what they will try to battle, to
There,
keep everybody
boy,
at the table.
Another battle royal.
You know,
Another battle royal. All right, let's switch to those, a couple of the big cities in town that have their own police departments, and boy, they've got problems too. And there's a common theme: Santana, Anaheim, Huntington Beach. In all of these cases, there has been a police chief who has been feuding with the rank and file union, and you know, what gives here?
Paying benefits. In Santa Ana, you have the police union. In the last few years, they were starting to get these arguments about community policing. Maybe we need to do a different thing and a different approach. What happened? The police union got very active in this last campaign cycle, spent $400,000, took over the city council, and now that debate is completely flipped. Now, right after that, they win that election cycle, the city manager gets booted, and the next one to go is the police chief. And keep one thing in mind, this is a police chief that's filed a claim alleging total corruption at the city. And keep in mind that he was hired by another law enforcement agency, BART, up in San
Immediately.
Francisco.
Yeah.
Immediately.
We're speaking
Yeah.
about
knowing that he has this thing pending. So, I mean,
let's mention who this is. This is Carlos Rojas, and he's now the police chief for the Bay Area Rapid Transit System. And immediately left Santa Ana and got a job there. So somebody must like this guy.
now the Santa Ana Police Union says this guy is a disaster and he's horrible and he wasn't solid and he couldn't get them the what they needed and that they were holding officers accountable in a way that was not fair.
The
And
union
yet-
president, by the way, says he was shocked by the false accusations that Rojas has made.
So this is the same union, though, of course, that was very upset with Mr. Rojas. I guess we call him Chief Rojas.
Right.
Because he cracked down on the cops who were caught on video in the pot raid,
Yes,
I believe, in the
yes.
medical
Which
marijuana
we've
dispensary.
run on
which
this
we've
show, and we've
about.
talked about where the cops
Started
came
eating
in
brownies.
and derogatory comments about one of the employees
Yes.
eating the brownies and thinking they had knocked out all the cameras,
but had failed to knock out all
they
the cameras.
didn't, and so they got caught.
Yeah. And the police union came out and said, who are you going to believe, us or your lying eyes? Like we could kind of see this going on. And it was one of those, this is just fake news things. It was crazy.
And yet they're in control now. In Santa Ana, they are driving the bus there. And as you said, other budgetary, allocations, libraries, open space, things that frankly, and this is the thing, all of us have to do a better job of getting more nuanced about what enhances public safety. It's not just one officer or a firefighter. It's having better parks, having better libraries, having better schools, having better infrastructure, jobs. All of that collectively enhances public safety.
And in Santa Ana, the crowd out is now being evidenced when you talk to people about the problem of homelessness, which is just exploding along the Santa Ana River. And you've got residents up in arms and complaining about this all the way along the 57 as well. I mean, this is one of those crowd outs where people say, we don't have any money. Where's your money going? Well, it's going to pay
And here's a perfect example. At the county, years ago when they had the homelessness explosion going on, they only had funded two mental health nurses. Only two. For something like 1,000 people at the Civic Center. That's again one of these ideas about where are you allocating your resources, because some of these people are frankly eligible for a lot of aid.
As the costs of pensions go up and up, there's less and less to spend on all of those other things.
That's exactly right.
All right.
Can I ask
let's
a question?
talk about, before you ask your question, let's go to Anaheim, because I would like to get in who these other police chiefs are. In Anaheim, you have Police Chief Raul Quesada.
Yep.
Thank you. And I always have to turn to you or to Will, who's also very fluent. Quesada. Raul Quesada has filed a claim against the city, which could be a precursor to a lawsuit, saying that his reputation has been damaged, his earning capacity. He's highly thought of by Mayor Tom Tate and many of the other city officials here who seem to be taking his side against the union. Once again, a police union that files a vote of no confidence. They say he's guilty of favoritism, retaliation, alleged retaliation, infighting. The union president says some captains can't stand being in the same room with each other, and that there's all these problems, and claims they don't object to some of the other things the chief has instituted, like or wants to do, like body-worn cameras and that sort of thing. So anyway, again, here you've got another chief who's saying, hey, I got to protect myself because this is becoming intolerable.
Well, I think the common denominator here goes right back to the conversation we started with, and that is that all of a sudden you have this just eruption. You have these chiefs just being fired out of cannons, out of city after city, or resigning, and you got to ask yourself, like, why? I can't recall a time in 30 years of really kind of actively watching, reporting on the county. I can't recall a time when you had that many chiefs suddenly just like evacuating for better jobs, and claiming that they were at war with their own union. And they're at war with the union over financial issues, over the number of cops. You mentioned Mission Viejo. Is it 39 or 35 cops we need? The union will tell you it's got to be 39. So the police chief has to try to figure out how to adjust that number so that he can match a budget, and therefore they're at war with these guys.
So let's go finally, and this might be a good one to close on, because if there is one that really seems stark, it's in Huntington Beach, where you have this chief, Robert Handy, who by the accounts of virtually every community group and every public official has been doing a great job. Took over a department that has a history of problems. They didn't even have dashboard cams. This guy has put in body cameras. He has instituted community programs, bilingual programs. The community groups love him. He's been reaching out. But he's been looking into police misconduct cases and things like that. And but they have stalled labor negotiations, and they've taken a no confidence vote. And in this one, it's really interesting that at least to date, the city has been really standing behind this guy. And one official said of the union, I don't think they've ever come after a chief like this. He said, but I don't know if they've ever had a chief like this. So.
Yeah, this all reminds me, and you'll pardon me for going way far afield here, it reminds me of the fact that the Soviet Army, the Red Army, right before World War II, they were allowed to elect their own officers, and the guys they elected were guys they liked who would treat them well. And then they lost. They got wiped out. I think that we're in a position now where our public servants are electing our leaders, and they're electing guys they like, and they're going to lead us right into destruction, financial destruction. The math is going to be I was going to say a delight to watch. It's going to be an apocalypse financially.
What I find interesting, Norberto, on these the union, and I'm not saying, because I think you and I have talked about this, we don't really know because we're not there. And so you've got these lawsuits and these allegations, and sometimes who knows what the truth is. But it does seem to me that when you've got all of these police unions now going after chiefs, why now? Why everybody at once? And there's some common themes you consistently hear.
Are you suggesting something like a playbook?
No, a playbook. Inadequate equipment. We're understaffed. Officers are leaving for other departments. The force has slipped from the elite status it had. There's a lack of leadership. There's favoritism. It's almost like a checklist every time. I'm thinking, well, they're all slipping. They were all elite, and now they're all slipping, and all these officers are going somewhere else. I want to know. We got to do a show on the department that all the officers are going to. You got 15 seconds.
All while you're paying more. And the key here is that you don't have city council members or county supervisors that are doing their job. They have to manage. You can't leave just everybody to do whatever they want, or you get this.
Great show, guys, and we will continue. I think we can talk some more in our open mic. So that's it for now. Thanks again to my guests, Will Swaim and Norberto Santana. You can watch this show and past shows by going to pbssocal.org or rickreiff.com. You can also catch our show and our post-show open mic chatter on YouTube. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Memorial Care is transforming the way healthcare is delivered, keeping our communities and businesses healthy by guiding them on the path to wellness with easily accessible hospitals, physician offices, and outpatient centers. Memorial Care, leading the way.